We haven't done this for a while. Welcome into Starting Five. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at Five Reasons Sports. I got Manny Chang as the producer today. I want to tell you about the two sponsors, and then we'll tell you about some things that are going on in the network, and then we'll get to today's topic. But we are going to be doing more of these as we go forward. Just again to set the table, we've got a lot of things going on the Five Reasons Sports Network, particularly on this channel, and I think sometimes they get lost because if you're not on Twitter, and I understand certainly why some of you are not these days, then you don't see everything. I do want to tell you about the two sponsors of this particular program, though. Our friends over at Prize Picks. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Get that initial deposit matched up to $100. I wish I'd played yesterday because I had some good ideas, but I never got around to it. Make sure that you use the code 5. You can download it from the Google Play Store, the Apple App Store, or prizepicks.com, as I said. But if you use that code 5, you get the initial deposit matched up to 100. You don't have to put down 100 if you don't want to. The advantage is that that's what they're going to match. They're going to do it one time, and it's free money. And of course, this has become sort of the premier fantasy daily app. Also sponsored by our friends over Water Cleanup of Florida. You can check them out at WCUFL.com. That's WCUFL.com. Michael Robert and his team. We know about the flooding that happened here in Broward County recently. I was involved in some of that. I mean, I didn't cause the flood, of course, but WCUFL.com. You got water damage, you got mold damage. They do the leak detection, they do the damage assessments. They also do the preventative maintenance, which is really important because we know the insurance companies don't always take care of you after the fact. Again, it's WCUFL.com, 561-408-7835. If you got the schmutz, they got the guts. All right, do want to tell you about a couple things going on here in the network. First, want to thank everybody for getting us 25,000 subscribers here on YouTube. We appreciate that. Make sure you have your notifications turned on so that you'll see all our content during the day. Sometimes I miss some of it, and I mean, I'm in charge of a lot of it. So make sure that you have the notifications on so that you can watch what you want. Obviously, there's more than just Heat here, although we do a ton of Heat. Canes episode last night, Six Rings Canes. And obviously a lot of Dolphins content during this part of the year. Messi and company will be back soon. So we got a lot of stuff going on here on the network. Also, make sure you check out the Off the Floor Discord. That's for $5 on the floor, $2.99 per month. The description for that is going to be in all the podcasts, whether it's on the feed here or on the podcast feed. Okay, so thank you very much. All right, here's what I want to get to today. I polled this yesterday, and I was just curious what people thought. If they have comments on it, I'll take them, and we'll put some of those up here if we can. We're in a really interesting place in South Florida sports because typically, and I've been doing this now for almost 30 years, that's how old I am, the teams are not good at the same time. There's been very few kind of crossover years, particularly between the Heat and the Dolphins. Now, the Panthers obviously had a ton of down years. So, there was 1996, and the Heat were competitive at that point. Dolphins were in transition from Shula to Jimmy Johnson. But other than that, the Panthers really haven't done much of a significance. And, 2003, when the Marlins, 1997, the Dolphins, again, in that same stratosphere, the Heat were in the middle of the Zoe Tim years, repeatedly losing to the Knicks in the playoffs. 2003, when the Marlins won, that was a surprise to people. Sort of came out of nowhere. The Dolphins were not in the best place. They were, Wannstedt was kind of killing what we thought they could have been. And then if you go forward here too with the Heat, they just drafted Dwayne, so they were coming out of a little bit of a dark period there for a couple of years. So now we have a situation where the Marlins were competitive this year. I know that's not why everybody's tuned into this. The Panthers obviously went to the finals, but the biggest thing is that the Heat are still relevant, right? Like as of right now, depending on the day, they're between 3rd and 7th in the Eastern Conference. And obviously they had some losses lately that were frustrating, particularly the Pacers lost at home. The Knicks, where they just didn't defend anybody, worst defense I've ever seen in person from them. And the Knicks defense, not the defense against the Knicks, but the performance against the Knicks in the fourth quarter, where they ended up giving up 21-point lead. They gave up a 21-1 lead against the Bulls. So I know Heat fans are frustrated by some of the results, even though there's some promise with this roster, I think. Need some help at the point guard position, some concerns about how you're going to get through if Bam is hurt for any period of time. We did an episode on that today. But there are, like I said, there are nice pieces. Like Jaquez obviously has outperformed expectations. Caleb Martin and Josh Richardson are sort of rounding into shape. And you figure Jimmy's going to care more as the season goes on. And now again, we'll see what Tyler can provide and what his role is, if it's the same as it was early in the season when he returns. But I think we can say that the Heat are in a good space overall. Okay, they're coming off a finals appearance. I know everybody wanted the big splash move, but a lot of franchises would like to be where they're at. And the difference, of course, is the Dolphins now, because the Dolphins have become in a lot of ways what the Heat were. The Dolphins go out and make the big splash moves now, and you see how they pay off. They have arguably the league MVP in Tyreek Hill, which was a move. They went out and got that guy. Somebody else could have gone out and got him. They traded the draft picks. They gave him the contract. They pried him away from Patrick Mahomes. Jalen Ramsey. Okay, say it's an easy decision to trade, what was it, Hunter Long and a draft pick to go get him. Well, nobody else did, right? Nobody else made a commensurate move to that to try to bring somebody like that in. And look at the way he's played. He's totally transformed their defense. If you look at it, like, it may not seem like it because you don't hear his name a lot other than that one game, but it's because nobody's throwing at him, and it's changed the way that teams are playing against the Dolphins. So they have made the big splash moves, okay? And they've also transformed their organization internally with the Mike McDaniel hire, which is going to go down as one of the best hires that anybody's made in South Florida. And I give Steve Ross credit because it was kind of a counterculture sort of hire, goes against not just the league's thinking, but his thinking in particular from what we've seen. And it's been brilliant. And I am a huge McDaniel fan, and I think that this should be the guy here for the next 15 to 20 years. It's going to make mistakes along the way, but the thing seems like, with the exception of the third and short, fourth and short stuff, seems like he's willing to correct them. So they're in a really good place. And when two teams are in a really good place, their athletes are going to resonate with fans in town. And as I was thinking about this, polling this, I'm thinking, I can't remember a time when the athletes on the two teams were as likable as they are. And so I polled this. That's our guy, Mateo Mayorga. That's an interesting question. I'll get into that here. When you take a look at the primary athletes on the teams, now I understand the issues that people have with Tyreek Hill because of his past. I get that. Okay. And so I'm not, without getting into allegations and all that sort of stuff, I'm gonna put that to the side here for a second. Okay. And I'm just gonna say what he's projected to the fan base here, which is a really good teammate at the very least, right? Like, he has been the supportive guy of Tua to the point where when somebody gives him credit, like I think it was Grant Paulson on Twitter did yesterday, for adjusting to a terribly thrown ball, he goes on Twitter to make the person look foolish to say, no, that was my fault, not Tua's fault. I mean, as a teammate, he has been the ultimate teammate. And obviously, there's a charisma there with him, just simply in the way he plays, right? Which is, everybody wants to run fast, okay? And he runs the fastest. And Tua is, I mean, there are no issues there from a personal perspective. And he's just extraordinarily likable, which is, because he is introspective, as we've seen him get more comfortable, which again, most of that has to do with Mike McDaniel, who is extraordinarily likable. All right. Like, press conferences are fun with the Dolphins now. I cannot say that's been the case for the past 25 years. But Tua has opened up in these press conferences. He was closed up. And everybody's like, oh, he has no personality. It's not that. He has a personality. He just didn't feel like he could show it under Brian Flores and in the previous situation. And now, as we've seen him open up and be introspective and be critical of himself and talk about how hard he was on himself and how he's had to get through that and talk about his struggle, I don't know how anybody could be more likable, honestly. And for those who are religious, obviously, and even those who are not, there should be a respect for his faith. He doesn't throw it in front of people, but obviously he practices it, and it's important to him. And so I've never understood the national reaction to him, or why there is this need to bury him under every circumstance. He's like the least, qualified to be disliked among NFL quarterbacks. So I don't understand it, but I think that Dolphin fans have rallied behind him because of that. And so you have, again, this charisma from Tyreek. You have Tua and so this introspection and resilience, I think, which is an incredibly admirable trait. And then on the Heat side, you have Jimmy, who's all personality, obviously. I wouldn't say he's been the most cooperative superstar with the media among Heat stars that we've seen over time, but he provides his moments. And obviously, on the court, he's a show. Another one where I really don't understand the national perception because I didn't understand why people didn't want to talk about the Heat when the most interesting person in the NBA plays on the Heat. And then Bam is just Bam, and Bam is the guy who stays an hour later at the charity event. Bam is the one who makes sure everybody in the media has what they need. Bam is the one that when they can't find somebody to do something, is the one who raises his hand. Bam is the one who embraces his teammates. Bam is the one who earned the captain role with the way that he's not just acted and performed, but the way that he's endeared himself to the Heat greats of the past, whether it was Haslam or Wade or Bosch or Mourning or any of those who speak so highly of him. So just those four, and that doesn't include, Tyler Hero, who has a fan base, and many others, on the Dolphins who have them and deserve them. It's an interesting debate at this point, I think, to say who's the most popular athlete in this town. And so I polled it, and Jimmy won so far. It's at about 2,500 votes. And he was creeping up over 45%, and I think he ended up about 38%. And then second was Tua, but pretty far back, low 20s, and then under him, right there was Bam, and then a little bit lower was Tyreek, although he did, I think, get over 16% last time I checked. And again, that speaks to where we are in this town because I think in the past there was for a while it was Marino, right? And then Dan faded, Zach and Jason came in, and the Heat, had Zoe and they had Tim, but it was Dan pretty much until the time that he was over with. And then starting in about 2004, 2005, it became Dwayne. And then in 2006, it was Dwayne, right? And so it was always clear who the guy was here. And I think now first thing, as a network that covers all the sports here in South Florida, it's great for us because there's lots of places we can go here where we know the fans are going to react, positively because they like a lot of the athletes involved. That doesn't even include some of those on the other team. Okay. Arise on the Marlins seems to be a likable person. The Panthers, of course, Kachuk, okay, Barkov. I mean, with what Kachuk did in the playoffs last year, people related to that, okay, because he has so many like Jimmy-like qualities, actually, just in how clutch he was and everything that the Panthers went through that was parallel to what the Heat went through. Barkov, more of a Bam-like figure, okay, in terms of personality, but again, has been sort of a model citizen since he's been down here in South Florida. And then, yes, Messi, okay, which goes beyond just, that little stadium off Commercial Boulevard, but worldwide. We have more, I think, athletes to relate to down here, somebody for everyone, that you can root for and feel good about it, then honestly, I think we've had down in this market since I've been down here, covering 27 years ago, 28 years ago. And I think that's a good thing. But here's where I'm at with it. And then I'll get to Mateo's question and then I'll close here. What was the more impactful trade for Miami, Shaq or Tyreek? Okay, and that's what Mateo asked. And Zayzone says, I'd argue Jimmy's trade was the most impactful. Took us from dark place in Heat history back to the spotlight of greatness. I think the Dolphins were already on the rise before the Tyreek trade. That is fair. I think if you're going to compare the two of them, but I think the reason, and I think I would make the argument that hiring Mike McDaniel is right there with trading for Tyreek. I think the reason that the Tyreek trade is so important is it showed everybody the Dolphins were going to go for it because they were going the other direction a couple of years prior, obviously, when they traded Tunsil, get all the draft picks, etc. But now it was, okay, we're going to be the big splash team here. We're going to go get the guy that everybody wants. And I think in a lot of ways that not only changed the perception of the organization outside of it, but also inside of it with the players. When you go get the big splash guy, and I know Heat fans are going to say, see, this is why they should have tried to get Dame. They did try to get Dame. They didn't try maybe as hard as people would have liked, but they were interested in Dame. When you make that kind of move, it galvanizes the other players who are still there. Okay, that yes, we are trying to compete. We're trying to compete now. But I would agree that the Jimmy trade was critical because we are forgetting now where the organization was. It was in the Whiteside era. Not only did you get Jimmy, you got rid of Hassan, and and also then you cleared out James Johnson and Dion Waiters, and kind of what was, as Zayzone is saying, sort of a dark period there. But I'll close here, and again, a little all over the place today, but we just kind of want to have these conversations in the morning, give you something to think about, and again, tell you about the content we've got on the channel. I think right now, okay, Jimmy is the most popular athlete in this town, and I understand why. But if they get to a Super Bowl, it changes completely. And I think also my perception that Jimmy's the most popular athlete in this town is probably colored by the fact that in 5 reasons, because of how we started as a Heat podcast, I would say 70%, and I've polled this too, about 70% of our followers on 5 Reasons Twitter would probably identify with the Heat before the Dolphins, whereas I don't think that's the case in the general public down here. So maybe it's even a little bit closer already. But I'll say this: if they get to a Super Bowl, Tua will clear. It's not going to be close. It's always the quarterback. The fact that he has no issues or perceived issues in his background will obviously play into it. And I just want people to recognize kind of what they're seeing here is that Tua has a chance. Okay, as great as Jimmy was, obviously, and is, as much as he's accomplished. LeBron winning 2 championships, but he never cleared Dwayne because he wasn't Miami's. Okay, as much as people related to Zoe and Zach and JT and all the rest of this, the lineage in this town in terms of the king, if you go back off and just look at it, is basically going to be Marino Wade too. That's where it's going to be. And that's the opportunity that presents itself here with a team 9-3 with 2 more winnable games coming up here. Number 1 in the AFC as we speak, with the Bengals winning that game last night against Jacksonville, and with a real chance to go 13-4 or better and have this thing run through Miami. I want to thank the producer, Manny Chang, here today. Thank our sponsors, Water Cleanup of Florida. Go to Prize Picks, use that code 5. FIVE, get that initial deposit matched up to $100.